Night.
Hey, Rob.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. Hi, Rob, how are you?
I was like, I'm in my office. Yeah.
So,
Hi, everyone.
good, great. So Trace, will you do roll call, please? I would love to.
Chairwoman Weber McLeod,
Here.
Counselor Cuddy,
Here.
Mr. Andre,
Here.
Mr. Lovell.
Here.
Ms. Crawford.
Here.
Mayor Giantino is excused. Ms. Leon is excused. Ms. Walter.
Here. So the first thing on the agenda is, I'd like to have, if you had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes. If there's any corrections, questions, we will entertain them now. If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes. That's good. Moved by Mr. Lovell.
I'll second.
Counselor Cuddy. Any discussion? Not, all those in favor?
Aye.
We have some new business items. Terry, we're going to start with the report of the governance committee.
Sure, thank you, Chair. We have, we just met, the governance committee just met, at 4 o'clock prior to this. We reviewed the self-evaluation and, you know, some general notes, based on the evaluation, we see improvement, of the board with respect to, moving forward, past you know, the few years of the last few years where CETA transitioned or dissolved for you know, basically, and so we see that there's definitely progress, more confidence in board membership. One of the things I personally noted was that because of such hardship of not only the dissolution of CETA and creating a lot of uncertainty, but the audit from a few years ago where we obviously noted we missed some of our payments and had some billing issues. We as a board have become more aware of our oversight responsibility, and we're making steps to improve that, and I think being more thorough, more engaged. And you know, I admit, being on the board, I've been on the board for coming on 11 years now, and you know, CETA did a really great job in the beginning and really did a lot of work for us, obviously, but you know, now we have to take on a lot more responsibility. And as we are grateful that MRB has fulfilled the role as the director, you know, it's humbled us as a board to like make sure we're doing what we need to do to stay in compliance and to make sure that we're you know, doing what our mission is. So besides that, that we see like we're improving ourselves. There were a few more you know, notes just basically in general. It was a positive, but there were some somewhat agrees and somewhat disagrees, which obviously happens, and I'm glad that we're that there is that candor, and based on Tracy's evaluation, a lot of those are from different people, so it wasn't like one or two of the evaluations had things going down straight lines. So that seems to me that, you know, we as a board, you know, have different, like, I guess different viewpoints, but it's not like one or two people are just putting things like the same thing down the whole line. So at least I saw that as a good thing, but that was a discussion point with the audit, with not the audit board, but with the governance board. If any of my colleagues on the governance board want to add to that or want to bring their perspective.
But it definitely shows that we're moving in the right direction and we still have some work that needs to be done, I guess.
Yeah, and so, and Tracy, we didn't have to vote on this or anything, right? And the second thing we talked about in the governance committee was the outline of ADA board priorities for project evaluation. And we feel that these are all really good. The industries of interest, having them laid out, metrics, community values are all very important. The consideration was that we feel that as all these are important and good for us as an internal document, we want to just keep it in mind as more of an informal, something that we would refer to in a more informal way as businesses come to apply for ADA benefits. Having said that, we want to continue with like Bomer coming in, companies like Bomer. We want to be open and basically have our website, and however businesses find out about our offerings, we want just the application to be the thing that gives them the opportunity to like, hey, this ADA looks like it's going to be something that can help my business. And then we, on the other hand, as board members, would have these all in mind when we are considering whether or not to provide those benefits to that business. Is that fair enough as to what our discussion was? So that was our governance committee meeting in a nutshell. Any questions? General board?
I think the only thing that I would just offer from my perspective as the chair, and some of those items where we have somewhat agree or somewhat disagree, I think in real time, if you're needing additional information, you're needing whatever that is that could move that to an agree, I think we should just talk about that, right? Because we get information, our meeting hits at a good, but don't hesitate to either connect with Tracy, myself, or just say it right in the room, right there. I'm just looking at some of the things that we might need more information or any of those kinds of things. So I think it's great that we have this diversity of thought. I also think sometimes these things happen and we don't keep them living. So I know I responded to some of those. So in those cases, if there's something more that you need, please don't hesitate to let myself know, let Tracy know, and just talk about it at the board meeting. Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you. We don't have to vote on this, correct? All right, Trace, you have report on the New York State Economic Development Conference?
Yes, so last week, February 11th, the New York State DC had their annual Economic Development Conference in Albany. And I was in attendance through MRV Group, was on a panel, wanted to do the panel because I'm fancy like that. And it was really interesting conference just because it's bringing to light how many kind of critical issues there are in economic development right now. Like I remember in past years, there was like some of those key sessions that everyone was gonna go to, but then the rest felt a little fluffy, maybe. Like I felt like all of the sessions of this were like critical and pertinent and relevant in the moment. So it was just really interesting to kind of see how engaged people were. And, this conference in particular, they had 300 people sign up before they had an agenda out. So, the economic development community has really come to trust that organization and that they're going to provide good content and good opportunities for the attendees. But anyways, just a couple of things that I noticed. I did go to a session on the Smart Eye Corridor, which is the tech hub from Buffalo to the Syracuse area. and focus on semiconductors and got a better understanding of how that's being organized. As we all know, it's a partnership between Buffalo, Syracuse, and Rochester. But I didn't fully understand how they're breaking up the workload and specializing within that. So really like everyone's doing everything, so the whole region has opportunities, but they're really focusing certain topics within certain universities. So for instance, University of Buffalo, UB, is actually the lead on the supply chain development, and one thing that they're creating is this thing called SCAN, Supply Chain Activation Network, and they're using that to look for existing businesses that are or could be in the future within the semiconductor supply chain, and trying to create that directory so that we can, you know, if there's a business that maybe isn't yet in that supply chain but has the capacity and capability to start making new product that is, we can make sure that we are in a organized and efficient way, connecting them with partners like TDO and ESD to get them up and running in those new business lines. Syracuse SU is focusing on commercialization, so commercialization of new technology. This is something they're very have history of. And then Rochester, Monroe Community College is where they're focusing the workforce efforts. But obviously there's a lot of partners throughout the region that are, or the regions, I should say, that are operating within each of these things. It's just that they've decided to specialize with the lead component on each of these topics. So I have a better idea of how to connect our businesses into this whole model now. And that whole system is still being refined and built, but there's definitely greater clarity around how that's going to start working. And there is actually a signed contract with the federal government at this point for the tech hub, so that's good. We think that's good. And then some of the other sessions were, the one that we moderated was about the public, I always call them the Public Subsidy Board. And so this is the group that, you know, Roy can speak to this, but basically this is the group that is monitoring and guiding the new laws around how IDAs have to account for what benefits a project is getting, so that if they reach a certain threshold of public subsidy, they have to comply with prevailing wage and WBEs. So in doing that panel, I learned a lot, but it's just know that that's an ongoing conversation about how that calculation should work and what should be included and what shouldn't be included. We obviously haven't really run into this, but you know, it's something that we could run into. And I think once things, hopefully in the next few months, there will be some clarity about how to account for pilots. One thing that's being recommended is like, you really shouldn't include pilots because you can't reliably calculate them. But if you're going to, you need to discount them for future years. You need to apply a discount rate. So, but that is not in action.
You would apply the discount rate towards how you would calculate the like that portion.
Well, no, there's basically the way that it's set up is like if your project is of a certain size, then it has at least 30% public subsidization through various grants and tax incentives and whatnot. If you hit that threshold, you then have to use prevailing wages and meet FWBE requirements, even as a private project. So it doesn't.
This is something that's new, then it wasn't already, or it just hasn't hit the projects that.
I don't think this would have seen any projects that have been in. So
like by saying it's a.
So it is in place. It's just that, yeah. So there is a law in place. There's just some ongoing conversation about what to include in the calculation of public subsidy and what not to include, and if you are going to include how. Especially for these things that are realized over time, you know, because like $5 10 years from now isn't the same as $5 right now. Obviously, $5 is a ridiculously low number when we're talking about these types of projects. But
My dad used to talk about those penny candies. Costing $5, so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll keep you posted as, you know, this becomes relevant to this group and make sure that you're fully engaged. And I think this might be a good board education topic once they actually come out with that clarifying language. But for right now, just know there is this conversation about prevailing wages, and there are IDA projects that could have to comply with prevailing wage and FWB fees if they exceed that threshold. So there's a lot of sessions about power. They
Yeah.
actually did a panel that had all of the New York State utility company presidents, which are actually all women right now, by the way. I didn't realize that. It was a really cool panel. But they all got on stage on a panel. It had a keynote panel about state of power and the state of power, what they're facing, what challenges they're facing, what we can do, what we need to be advocating for. And you know, there's always 5 sides to every story, but like generally speaking, the takeaways are the same thing we heard from NYSEG in our community conversation. It's we need to get them involved early in projects that are gonna have power demand, so that they can evaluate and raise any red flags early in the process, and then also start to figure out how to mitigate those challenges before it's a problem. Advocating for kind of streamlined processes that would make it easier for utilities to invest in infrastructure, and really advocating to bringing those utility companies to the table and having those conversations about state energy goals. And because it seems like there's a lot of goals that came out without actually talking to anybody about how power works. So just, you know, advocating for having those players at the table when we're talking about statewide goals on power generation, power use. But yeah, and then there was 1,000 other really great sessions, but you know, those are some of the highlights.
Questions for Tracy?
Yes, thank you. You said about UB for Buffalo.
Mhm.
Is RIT the Rochester
Monroe Community.
Monroe
Colleges,
Community MCC,
MCC, surprised, but
and then SU for Syracuse?
yes.
In commercialization of new technology, is that taking a rough product and refining it or selling the product or both? Commercialization.
It could be both. It's basically getting products to market. What do we need to do to
Okay.
get products to market?
Got
It might be stuff related to how do we get companies doing short, like provide opportunities for companies to do short runs or test runs or protocols. Not protocols, prototypes.
Prototypes. Yes, yes.
Or it could be, you know, how do we connect them with research institutions to work out those kinks, how to, you know, or it could be business planning assistance, or, you know, whatever it takes to get something from kind of ideation to market.
And it's a federally funded, how much is there state funding and all in it, or is the state pass through?
So the Tech Hub was part of the CHIPS Act, I want to say.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
okay, good.
So it is federal,
Okay.
and we're just, everything we've heard is that this is going to continue.
Good. Yeah.
Well, the Center State CEO board talks about this a lot, and Rob Simpson is saying, he's the CEO of Center State, that he's about 99.999% sure that the CHIPS Act is gonna be okay.
Okay.
And just with regard to what Tracy's talking about, the Tech Garden in Syracuse that's affiliated with SU is like an incubator for businesses that are doing the commercialization work. So there's a lot of companies there that have been really creating products, putting products into the marketplace. And they have the wraparound services for them to teach them how to market, develop
Good.
their budgets. So you can
Great.
Google the Tech Garden and kind of get a sense of what's going on.
Great, thank you.
That was fun. Had some really great sushi too. Yeah.
That and drinks.
That's what they had at the conference?
No, we went for dinner, we went across the
Oh,
street.
I was like, I don't know. I'm gonna eat that.
That would
I
be
would need
great.
conference sushi.
So Tracy. Really? Tracy, do you want to talk about the project monitoring piece?
I would love to.
Do you think?
So we talked about how, so one thing that is, we've kind of, I've mentioned this in the past, this is gonna come up in the state audit, the state comptroller's audit, is that we have a monitoring policy in place. That we have had a hard time actually implementing as it's written. And, you know, that's gonna come out in the audit, like, it's not a surprise, we've had issues with this in the past. But basically what our monitoring policy says is that in addition to the annual paper form that we ask for, it says that ADA and or CETA is going to do an annual monitoring visit to every single active.
Yes, I remember that.
Great idea.
Yes, I remember,
Comptroller's office loves the policy.
Yeah,
In reality, we've had a hard time actually following through on it. We did well for a
especially
couple of
now,
years, but-
especially now with the,
So there's kind of two aspects to this conversation. One is, are there changes we want to make to this policy? This is not state regulated. This is something we did to ourselves. Not for bad reasons.
we had the best intentions.
Yes, and the reality is the comptroller's office does look for us to be doing secondary ways of verifying that projects have been completed and that their jobs are what they say they are. And this is a good way to do this. One thing, but there are tweaks we can make to this that would make it perhaps more manageable, like saying, we'll visit every project at least every other year. And then it gives us the flexibility that if someone's in a hard spot, we can visit them a few years in a row. If someone's doing just fine, we visit them every other year. And so instead of, it's not like we have that many projects. It's just for whatever reason, the capacity has not been there. So I don't think we need to deal with that today, but it's something to think about as we're working on our policies, is maybe this is something we want to change.
Yes, I mean, maybe one of the things that we've talked about as like, you know, well, let's get to know the people who had pilots with us. I mean, there could be two things, not to say like, oh, let's get together so we could look and see how you're doing, but I think, you know, what is monitoring? Monitoring can be just, you know, checking in to say hello and having a meeting. Obviously, there's documentation that they need to, it's mentioned.
Yeah.
Want to ask you, is there a form?
Yes.
So there's that already.
Yes.
But I would say, like, as we, you know, recalibrate ourselves, you know, getting to know who already has pilots with us or getting reacquainted, that could be,
Yeah.
that could be part of it.
Yes.
Obviously, there could be a more thorough monitoring if we felt that was needed, but even just checking in and for purposes of the comptroller seeing that, like, oh yeah, there was we visited the floor, we got a tour of the floor, that's monitoring, right?
Yeah, and that's what all these site visits are, you know, and while we're there talking to them and doing these tours, we look around and say, hey, does it look like they had 50 employees?
Yeah.
Because they said they had 50 employees. Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, like, and asking them questions of like, what challenges are you seeing? What's keeping you up at night? What's your next opportunity? What gaps do you have? And so it gives us that chance to check in with them too, which is also not bad.
So Tracy, could it be a hybrid approach to that as well? So I'm hearing there's kind of two things that we do. They actually have a form that they complete. And then we have the opportunity to do an on-site visitation. Could we also invite someone, a representative from the projects, to come and give us an update? Like at one of our meetings, that's the board education piece, with the cumulative of that equate to monitor.
I wouldn't say, so having.
It has to be at their facility.
I think from the comptroller's perspective, going to the facility is a way of saying like, oh yeah, they've done what they said they're gonna do. I see it.
Right, yes.
Okay. But that said, they don't dictate what that means.
Right.
They don't say we have to do site visits.
Mhm.
They basically say, we want to see more than the annual form,
Right,
whatever that looks like for you.
okay.
And for us, theoretically, it's site visits.
Mhm.
And But in this time of transition, to your point, this year might be a good year to try to hit them all in one way or another.
Yeah.
So here's a list of the active projects for 2025. Bone Mare's coming online, but we don't really need to monitor them.
Yeah,
here.
get them started first, right?
And, we've got kind of, what have they committed to, what have they reported? Have they been verified by, an NY45 or some other method? And then, thinking about site visits, the mayor did just recently go to Newport, so he basically did his monitoring for me. He gave me a report out on what he experienced. I have the form that I filled that information into. So if anyone is, open to doing some of these visits, that definitely helps. There's also a few that might be interesting to just have board meetings there.
Yeah,
Like
That's
RJ.
I like
creative,
it.
and I love it.
We used to do that.
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember going to Mac Studios.
I do too.
We could probably do it at the hotel, right?
We could do it at the hotel.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
It's just the hotel stuff.
We'll just show
you
the
know.
London subs at the central building too.
Yeah, and I was thinking like some of these, especially these newer projects,
Right.
like RJC is new.
yeah.
I don't know if we went to,
I did the holiday
the
party.
holiday party, it's probably worth seeing.
I think, I think that's a great idea.
I do too.
I would love to have a board meeting at Prison City North.
Yeah.
I'll just throw that out
Right.
there.
It is the spot.
In the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That comes to
It's
mind.
Summer, in the summertime.
Seminary Commons, could go to the fire department,
Mhm.
even though that's not technically in the pilot anymore.
Right.
But you can walk around and see what else is, there's a gym there, there's Zendan, there's So What is in
Yeah,
there, just kind of see what's happening there. So I think that there's,
I think all these are really important and any ones that we're not gonna have board meetings. I'm certainly happy, I'm gonna use the B word again, but I'll volunteer to do any of them.
Yeah, yeah.
If there's a, especially if there's a form or something like that, here are the things that we wanna know from these folks. I think it's a pretty. What?
Didn't realize that you take Central High.
No, I will not allow it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But especially if we have some kind of a form or something like that, here's things that, to make sure that we get answered while we visit, things to look at. I'm happy to go meet with people and look at what they're doing and help to monitor. We've got that at the time.
One of the things, Dan, thank you for doing that we talked about with the comptrollers, there will
Bill's
be.
about to retire.
That's it. It'll be my preference that we not be haphazard about this and that Tracy's presented us with the projects that are available. So I think we have, minus the ones where we would hold board meetings, there were just a few others to do. So Dan is agreed to do one, of course, Tracy, if you gotta identify one for me, but I'd like us to kind of have this planned out so that we all are making the commitment to be there. Especially the ones where we're not gonna hold board meetings, so
Yeah.
we have the list, I'd like you to think about it, if there's something that's close to your heart. If you wanna send me in, I got you, and we will just make sure that we make this part of the work of the board. Okay?
Yes.
So we'll just let's practice this year, and then it'll just become the way we breathe, that it's the board's responsibility to adopt and organize a project to go visit and or we'll hold a board meeting there.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And if Dan wasn't gonna volunteer, I was gonna volunteer.
We call that being voluntold.
It wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah.
No, I volunteer to go on a site visit myself. So,
Yeah, I can help in some way, but
Yeah.
like Dan said, I would just want to make sure that maybe we reviewed what.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we could, there could be a pair, it
so
could be a
that I know.
pair. I would maybe Tessa and I could go.
Right.
I've been on the board for a few years and,
Yeah,
this will be like
helpful.
my first time too,
Yeah.
but like, it would be good to just kind of like, and then if you felt more
Tracy,
comfortable,
what
go
else did he
alone
do?
another time,
Yeah.
but yeah. it might be good.
Yeah, so that when Tracy's available, Tracy could be the partner. And then I think that before we embark on the journey, if we just need to take a few minutes at a board meeting to let Tracy review with us what our internal agenda would be for these visits, then I think we'd all be more confident about doing them. So Tracy, we can get together, maybe to think this through a little more strategically, everybody sees the companies that we're, I think we're gonna share what the mayor discovered.
Well, yeah, so this, I mean, we're not talking a huge amount of stuff here, so
Right.
this is the report that we just filled in based on the mayor's visit to Newport. I, ahead of it, filled out some of this information that we know from what they've reported already. So I fill in, okay, what was the scope of their project? What did they commit to in their application? What did they give us in their last annual report? So like, and then the question is, does it seem like they have 276 people? They said they have 275 as of the date of the visit. The mayor noted that it was the shutdown day for part of the plant, so there weren't as many people on site as there would be on other days, because they do maintenance to the furnace once a week. Because you just can't keep it running every day. So he noted like, okay, it doesn't look like 276 people, but here's why. He discussed kind of what's coming up with them. They do intend to be, or they do expect to be part of regional projects, I-81, the Bill Stadium, Micron, like they're already having those conversations to get those procurement opportunities. And then what are their challenges? And they named a few challenges that they're having. And then what else might be of note? They're celebrating 50 years this year. So there will probably be some celebrations and something to keep an eye on. So this is really, and you know, we can talk more about if there's other things you want to cover here. But from a what looks good to the controller perspective, really it's this. Everything else is like,
With the shutdown, or you can just.
well, like just the verification of the employment.
Oh, gotcha.
Everything else is good for us to know in case like, this is a good opportunity to say, do you have an upcoming project that you
Yeah.
might need help with? And who can like, and then whether it's Ada or someone else, we can help connect them with people who are.
Or if they want an extension in like. We want to make sure that they lived up to the, you know, the last extent, if they haven't done what they've done from the. Something before, this would be a good way to make sure like. We're doing our due diligence, so I'm on board, I can definitely. Go to one or two businesses.
So Tracy, the places where you were suggesting that we have physical meetings on site, do you feel comfortable just going ahead and reaching out to them? Which leaves those other entities. And that I would like us just to pay attention to the list. Dan's one, we're all agreeing that it'll be one of our responsibilities to go on the site visits. We can go with two of us together, and or when Tracy's available, she can join us as well. We see that there's kind of a format for the kinds of things that we need to cover. And I'd like by our next board meeting for us to have laid out who's doing what, where, when, how. Sound like a plan? Great. And then it'll just be the way we breathe.
So I can send this list out to
I
everybody.
was gonna say that would be great, Trick.
Good.
We could also, I know they have this board on there. This is Positive the Arts, WST 33.
Yeah.
So I know they have a nice board game or two.
It's a great board meeting. It's a great board.
May I ask a
We've had
question?
a meeting there too.
Yeah, I think, yes, when we had a couple meetings there when we were doing testing the first time around.
As far as Bluefield Manor, like. We're done with them, or I'm just curious as to like how that. Is where that is, even if we're not involved in it directly, just I need to know.
Okay. So Bluefield Manor, they had a pilot and a bond. The
Okay.
pilot done, over with,
Okay,
no longer receiving any kind of property tax incentives.
okay,
The bond is a longer term bond, so I think it was 30 years when they got it. So it's really just that conduit now.
so it's a conduit,
Yeah, so we're not responsible for their bond. They
Okay.
pay their bond. We just have to report it in our Paris report every year, how much they paid off. Where this is one of those situations where we're in the title of that just for the sake of them getting the tax exemption on the interest. So we don't have any responsibility for it.
okay,
Um,
just curious.
and like all of their incentives on their project report show up as 0. Because we don't have to report on the
Okay.
interest.
All right,
So we're not doing much with them anymore. We're really just like entitled them for the bond.
So the paperwork that is sent to the companies that have pilots, does that go in with their payment in lieu of tax bill? Or is that sent out differently,
It's sent out separately.
separately?
So we bill usually in September. The form is a year-end form, so we usually send it out in December and say, please get this back to us by, I think, January 31st. And we say that because we know we're gonna have to pester a few of them after that, and we
Yes.
really need them for the parish reporting at the end of March.
Right,
Because that's where we get the numbers that we put into the parish report. So we do send them separately because just of the timing component of it.
and are they generally income?
They've actually been really good this year. There's a couple of
Stragglers.
slackers right now, but.
Isn't there like a $1,500? Isn't there like a $1,500 fine if they're late?
Only for the pilot.
Fine, okay, I'm sorry.
If they habitually don't send their annual reporting back, we could theoretically default their pilot.
Okay.
That is an option that the board has. We're not there.
We're not there. Okay, fair. You would let us know
I
if we
think-
were.
Yes, I think there's 2 that we have outstanding right now. But I think we'll get them.
Okay, good,
We always do. So, because we pass through them. They get-
good. I have one, can I ask one more
Please
question?
do, this is what we're doing this for.
I know that we had some issues. Has the county voted on whether or not we had,
This is a question for you, Rob. I was actually gonna ask you this and then I forgot.
Can you hear us? Okay.
Rob, can you hear us?
I'll have to double check with the county.
Cause I thought they were gonna consider it last one.
Yeah, they were supposed to, but I didn't get any word that they had passed it or anything like that. So I'll follow up with the county attorney.
Okay, thank you. Wanted to just follow up.
Yeah, no, of course.
Thank you.
Karen, I guess with the project monitoring policy, I think if it's reduced to writing, then we ought to do. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And-
and so, like this is over 10 years old.
Yes.
And while in with the comptroller's office, doing their responsible acts as far as the audits go and so forth. Yeah, I think that I feel good about fine tuning this so that if it's something that we're going to do, that we do, and that it's not just words on paper.
Correct.
I agree, especially since we're making the commitment to
Absolutely.
embed this as a practice of this board and future boards as well. So I think we need to make sure that the policy reflects the universe we really want to live in as it relates to doing this task and making it so that it's feasible and reasonable for people to do. Because if capacity is the issue, right, then I love the idea of the rhythm of it, maybe, changing the cadence of it to really align with the busyness of the people that are in this room. So I agree. So Tracy, would that policy go into the governance committee for review? Who
Yeah,
reviews
I
it?
think.
Who would do
since-
the initial?
I think the governance is a good place to put that policy.
Right.
And, I think maybe the move is when the governance committee will meet again in probably October or December. And I think when we get around to that policy review, we can insert this one instead of just the Paris ones or the state ones and have that conversation about how did the monitoring go?
Right.
And do we want to make changes to this?
But that
policy?
doesn't preclude us from basically using this policy to launch this initiative.
No, I
Okay.
think I like the idea of saying like, let's use this
Okay,
year.
let's use that as the
And
guidance.
since we do want to visit everybody anyway, 'cause
Right.
it's been a while.
Right.
And then at the end of this year, let's think back on how it went and
Okay.
decide if we need to make any changes.
Got it.
Is that the only thing that they noted that we weren't complying? Cause like if we keep this one, are we going to be written up again for?
Well, we're not even got audited.
That anyway.
They provided some thoughts that we can't really talk about publicly, but this one I told you was gonna happen.
Yeah.
Oh, so.
Comfortable and customary
Right.
for.
So they, just as a general update, we did have a debrief with the state comptroller's audit. They gave us notes of what to expect, and so when we have the draft, we'll share it.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be a few months, this is not.
Preliminary.
But there wasn't anything that was. Like. I felt actually pretty good about it, and I think there's simple things we can do to do better, and. To your point, that's the reason we do audits, so.
Yeah, I looked in the minutes too, typed up, Tessa's excited for that.
Everything's
I
documented.
was very excited when I expressed it.
That's hilarious. I love my friends who love this. I'm like, good, you be excited about it. So are we ready to transition, Trace? Yes. Everybody hanging in? Okay. So our board education people, speaking of audit, is going to be Tracy walking us through sort of it's just a board information piece, the parts of an audit. And I know that we all have experiences with them, however, from organization to organization, and I think things were relatively chaotic last year. So moving into this particular audit, I want to make sure that we have a shared understanding about the different pieces of the audit. So that when that information is being presented to us, we don't have anybody in the room. We can catch people who aren't here, let's go like, huh? Because that's not gonna work for us. So Tracy, would you just kind of walk us through high level?
It's gonna look like I pulled up the wrong audit report, but I did this purposely.
Mhm.
So basically, I don't feel the need to rehash anything related to last year's audit, so I decided not to put that on the screen here. Instead, we're looking at another IDA's audit, very same components. This is done by a different firm, but it's got all the same things in it. So I'm just gonna run through really quick of what the different sections are. And Tessa, feel free to jump in if there's something you think is important, given your expertise. And also note a few things that when we get ours, to like really take a look at that maybe you wouldn't normally, like within the notes. So there's a cover sheet, a table of contents. I don't feel like I need to explain those. The first thing in the audit report is this letter, the independent auditor's report. It's a letter outlining the opinion and the basis for that opinion. But that is really just like, usually these opinions are like, is it fairly, are the financials fairly stated? There's nothing here about necessarily like compliance issues, or it's really just saying, what are the financials within this audit report fairly stated? And what is our basis for saying that? And then it outlines the responsibilities of the IDA in the process of the audit, as well as the responsibilities of the auditors in the process of the audit. This letter is probably the exact same letter that's gonna be in our audit. It's pretty much the same across. And then this one has information about required supplementary. So there might be a few other things, but basically it's just saying like we've used the like standard government auditing procedures. We believe the financial statement is fairly stated. And here was the process that it was on to do it. So. And then this is where we get into the management discussion and analysis. This is not an audited section. This is technically created by the management of the organization. In our case, Datable Wiki helps us with that, and we help, and basically it comes to staff and we help fill in some numbers and just like address any questions there might be. But they help us put this together, and then we fill in some of the glam, as much glam as there is. But this is basically saying this, we as an organization, this is how we understand our financial position. And these are the highlights of our financial position. So this is technically from us to the world, talking about our financial position. And this is not audited. And this would cover, notable changes from the prior year, any anticipated changes that could impact our operations or our financials. It's a place to cover like, here's what happened, here's what we're expecting as well. And you see like there's a financial analysis in here just to say like, oh, here's what happened year to year. This one is very long. I don't think ours are usually this long. And then you actually get into the audited financials. So the first thing is a statement of net position. This is really the balance sheet. It's a consolidated balance sheet, so they're gonna take what we have on our balance sheet, and consolidate it into specific lines. It's less detailed, but should be all the same numbers as what we have in our balance sheet. Then it goes into a statement of revenue and expenses. This is our P&L. It's a compiled version of our profit and loss statement. And they're gonna use some very succinct ways of pulling things together. We're gonna be talking about operating costs, not travel, not, you know, like supplies, like they're pulling a bunch of stuff, the overarching categories. Okay. And then so net position. That all comes down, net position beginning is the beginning of the year, net position ending is the end of the year. So, and the difference in that should be the change in the net position. So if you made money, your net position should go up. If you spent more than you brought in, your net position is gonna go down. And this is kind of where that comes from. Statement of cash flows actually goes over what happened with your cash in the year, because that's not always clear from your profit and loss, because sometimes you're making investments, capital investments that go on your balance sheet, that can show up on a profit and loss statement. So, or there could be other ways that cash is moving in and out that you're not gonna see on your profit and loss. So this puts all of your cash movement into one place. So you can see here, cash received from operating and then cash paid out for operating. So that's kind of your operating net income. But then you can see other revenues, it'll have investment activities, so interest that came in. Or if you put something into an asset that isn't really considered cash anymore. So this is really just showing, like, sometimes you'll see pilots in and out here. Like in ours, I think it shows like pilot revenues in, pilot payments out. Which at the end of a whole pilot cycle should even out. But because we're talking about year end, it could be that not all of the payments that came in actually went out before the end of the year. So in our case, we could have some extra cash in our accounts because we received a pilot payment on December 27th that didn't get dispersed before December 31st. So you'll see that kind of stuff here. So this is telling us, where did our cash come from? Where did it go? And how did it change? So you can see cash equivalents again at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, and the difference is your net change from the cash flow statement.
So, it's really funny, I used to hate cash flow statements, but
I hate them too.
this
They're so
actually tells a great story because, so where it says you've increased $96,000, it's great to know, because it looks like they had a CD. So it's great to know that really it was the operational piece that made that successful, and that's actually where that money came from. It wasn't just like this one-time CD thing and thank God the interest is there. It's showing success and they're operating throughout the year. And then I really like how they broke down what operating activity is, because like you can see that depreciation adjustment. So you have less than $2,000, that's not even really cash. So it's just like, that's what it shows to tie to that balance sheet where you were seeing the difference between cash and what a balance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so your change in net position versus your change in cash and cash equivalents might be different. For
So-
these reasons.
yeah, and it's good. So like in this, it's important to point out, like if I was presenting this, I would want to point out the difference between the CD activity and tying it back to the revenue that was received. To make sure the 96,000 is like from operation and not just like a donation. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like I was saying, pilot payments, this is where you can see, hey. $100,000 in cash isn't actually ours. That's not our cash. That's gonna have to go out. So there's kind of good information in this breakdown.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so and then this piece nets out. Like Tessa just said, nets out the difference in cash versus the net difference in net position. And then we get into our notes. So the notes are the part that I've always skimmed and like not had much interest in, you know, we kind of like, notes, whatever. But there are a few good things in here to pay attention to. In our financial statements, I did look at last year's to kind of get a sense of how ours are laid out, because they a little bit different. Note 1, similar to this, is a summary of significant accounting policies. And it just kind of outlines the policies and principles that are used in how we track our money and how they're looking at our money. For us in particular, I would recommend there in our note 1 last year, there was a payment in lieu of taxes section. And that has comments about the number and amount of pilots for each year. So that's just a good summary overview of what's happening with our pilot activity. There's a section on concentration of credit risk. So that would note if there are any assets that are uninsured or at risk. So that's looking at our cash balances in banks and making sure that everything is either covered by FDIC or collateralization. So that's a good place to look to just make sure that we're completely covered for all of our cash. And then conduit debt obligations, like this is where you're going to see any conduit debt that we have outstanding, including Bluefield Manor. And where those, since that doesn't show up on our balance sheet, that's how we know how much money is there and how much has been paid over the course of the year and what's expected to be paid coming up. So it's kind of just keeps us informed about what's happening with that conduit debt. Note 2. Is there anything on note 1 that you think people should be paying attention to other than? Note 2, I don't know, if this might be where things start to. In ours, our note 2 was about capital assets, so that provides details about Ada's land, equipment, and depreciation. So that's just good to keep track of our fixed assets. That gives you the details from the balance sheet of what is still on our books. So that's a good one to look at, and it shows you the depreciation specifically. We had another note on note payables. In the past, this is actually probably going to go away because we paid off our note payable to the city. So it might show up one more time because we paid it off during the 2024 year, but that's where you would see any debt that we have, which luckily now is 0. But you might still see it because we didn't pay off that until into 2024. And then other notes could be added to explain unique financial situations, like grant income, leases, option fees, anything that is kind of outside of what you would normally see on your P&L balance sheet. And it would give you descriptions of, you know, like if there is a lease payment, what does that lease schedule look like? And then after the actual financial audit, there's a couple. After the notes, there's a couple additional pieces to the audit. You know, there's often like a breakdown of more specific financial information.
Do we have the, where they do the pension, but we don't have that, right?
We don't have
There's no
pension.
pension.
So they have some extra stuff here. And then, so after the notes, we have an independent auditor's report on internal controls and compliance. This doesn't actually describe any opinions. It really just says what they did. It describes the scope of the testing. So it just describes what they did to look at our internal controls and describes how our internal controls could be, the different definitions or how they could be categorized if things are good or if things are not. But there's no actual opinions in this letter. Then we get into the report on compliance. So there was nothing to report here, so they didn't have it. But after that letter, there would be a report on compliance and a schedule of findings. And that's where they get into if there was a finding in internal controls or there was a deficiency, that's where they would describe it. Where we would respond to say, this is how we're going to rectify the situation. It would describe anything, it would perhaps provide recommendations for corrective actions. So this year, I expect to have that report as an update to last year's, and describe how things have changed since last year. But I don't anticipate any new findings. And then hopefully by next year, we don't have a report on findings. But
That's
you
the
know,
goal.
the report on findings would normally include discussion of prior year findings. So not every audit has.
And we had, so they already started the audit.
Yes, I talked to Taylor today. They started in earnest on Monday and they pretty much finished it up yesterday, which is a good sign. I did my fraud interview today and she seemed giddy. So.
Thank you, baby Jesus.
For what it's worth.
That's worth a lot. You know when you're sweating bullets, it's the truth.
Yeah, so it seems like they're pretty much wrapped up with the bulk of the work. They're looking at some additional post year end transactions just to tie things out. And hopefully we'll get a draft in a few weeks.
It's high level. And again, it's just, we don't need to be the technicians, right? We just need to be familiar with what the components are and the purpose of the information. Auditors will always get into explaining what it is we need to know and what it's saying. I just wanted us to kind of lay eyes on this in advance. And as always, we can continue to ask questions and get updates as we need it. And I'm thrilled that they're getting, that makes me very happy.
Yeah, and I would like knowing what kind of story the cash flow statement tells. Ask that question, like, what is this cash flow statement telling us? Like, what should we be taking? Like, don't be afraid to ask that question. Like, what should I be taking away from this? Because I think that it's worth asking those questions.
And maybe Tracy, we can just ask them to let us know that like these are things to pay attention to, like if this number does this, you should ask them, right? So if they can, I want us to feel free to ask questions, but if they can do reasonable amounts of education for us as board members so that we know the right questions to ask when numbers are moving, I think that would be great too. All right, can we keep the party going? Okay, let's do it. All right, so next we have Tracy and Tessa. We'll talk about the bills and our treasurers.
Bills, pretty standard. We did get we have a couple of wrong way here. We do have one pilot payment to disperse. And then we had a renewal of the domain in January. That was the Auburn98.org domain that renewed, and Take Root in Auburn, I think, is coming up in a couple of months. And then MRB Group, and then just the pilot disbursements for Seminary Commons. We do still have one outstanding pilot payment. Just show it to you. But everything else, so Seminary came in shortly after the end of the year, or at January 26th is when I got it. Did send them a late fee, but that's the one that'll get dispersed after this meeting. This one has not come in yet. They were also sent a late fee.
Oh, you did send the link, that was the one that we were considering.
Yeah, no, I did send it, because I still haven't.
Oh, so you agreed since the meeting you sent them?
Yes.
So,
So we recently invoiced and then didn't really get a response to it, so yeah, sent a late fee.
And who's that for?
Let's do.
It's in the red.
Sorry, it's. So. Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
I can read a speed zone sign, all right, when I'm driving.
But yeah, so everything else is in good shape, so that's the last one we're waiting on. I mean, that's everything that's been dispersed within the 30-day window, or basically within the 30-day window. And then with this one going out the next couple of days, that will allow me to later. So that's it on the bills.
Ready, Tessa?
Okay, we'll start typing on sheet. So, I think that, so it looks like we would have, like in that cash balance is also the seminary, the commons.
Yes, so the Sean checking is our
In and out
pilot account. $500 of that is ours, everything else is pilot.
So, you can see in the Shimon that Tracy had recorded interest, for that CD that we've had so far. There wasn't really any change. I would imagine some of this will change once we get those year-end numbers, but probably just more like depreciation of the fixed assets. And really the other thing again that Tracy had just explained with the audit, even looking at the other IDAs report, one of the things we want to see is that net equity. So, looking at the, comparing it from last year to this year and just seeing that it continues to go up. So that 5733, the negative amount is coming from, just the activity from January, which is basically two bills. We had $1,000 for the ADA dues or for the IDA dues and then the MRB group. So,
But in February, we did get the money from Bonnier, which is actually booked in 2024, but the cash actually came in February.
so we recorded that revenue last year, but the cash will be there. So, so that will be an influx into the cash, but it doesn't count for this year's revenue. But with projects in the works and we're in January, and really that's kind of like your minimum expenses that you're looking at anyway, just day-to-day operation. So, but that was it. Not much activity. Oh, so that's, sorry,
There it is.
there's the breakdown.
This was New York State EDC, $7,000. This is
Oh, wait, quick stuff.
This was QuickBooks.
Yeah.
And this is domain name, and then this was the money. And then this was your interest income. For just your savings account. So December 31st, we booked the CD interest to date. And we'll get a little bit more interest on that when the CD matures. Plus all the cash.
Just the cash flow, so back to. Which actually, I'm thinking about it, do we? I was gonna say something about like diversifying, like with bank accounts, just reaching out, and we'll just continue to look at interest rates to see, does it make sense to look at generations? Should we put in another CD? What kind of cash flow do we have?
Yeah, so that Chemung CD is maturing in February or March, I think. So we'll drop that. We'll have a conversation about that soon. Anything else? Good.
Finance committee is meeting in March, no, February, March.
That's what we missed. We did the motion.
Yes. Motion for the
April,
bills.
we're not meeting until April, sorry.
So.
Oh, yeah.
Good. We're gonna ask for a motion.
Oh, I have a motion to accept the financial report.
Second.
Thanks, Dan.
Second,
I'll second.
thank you. Any additional discussion? I again want to thank you all for doing a great job. It makes me very happy. If there's no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes. Thank you. Tracy, you have some unfinished information? Unfinished business updates?
Yeah, so one thing is to just remind you to send any names for the vacant board seat to Jimmy, or I'm sorry, to the mayor. Usually. To the mayor, for consideration, and so if there's anyone that you think would be a good addition, I'd love to get that filled. I also have an update on. I did send. We did receive an offer on the residential parcels.
Ooh.
I denied it.
Too little, probably.
I think we should have an executive discussion or
Okay,
an executive
sure.
session to talk about it, but also I did send out the parcels to the Central New York Home Builders and Remodelers Association and the Greater Rochester Home Builders Association. I just shot an email and said, hey, if you want to share this with anyone you think might be interested. It's on the MLS, this is what we're asking, here's the parcel information. So see if we get any bites from that. But yeah, I would appreciate an executive session to have additional conversation.
Second it.
Motion and second for us to enter into executive session to discuss our real properties. All those in favor? Those, okay. Final section. And the final section of. That's okay. I've been listening to these wisdom, but okay, second, this is a lot of other place. So just the last thing is, do you have any board updates, anything that anyone needs to offer? I would like, go ahead, Chess.
Oh, I was just going to say, it says the state of the city and counties, March 21st, I'm pretty sure it's the 20th.
Oh, no.
Well, the chamber, letter that we received, or email, it said it was the 20th, which is a Thursday.
Mhm.
But, I don't know if historically it's been like on a Thursday versus any other day of the week, so I don't know. If it's correct.
Well, I looked it back up and then, cause I had it in my calendar, so, and then I looked it back up on the flyer and it said the 20th.
And I just.
So maybe
have-
last year it was the 21st.
Yeah, and I just have a brief reminder to the board based on a piece of feedback that I got, right? So you know that all of our meetings are public and recorded.
Yeah.
And someone connected with me, we were having one of our very robust conversations about a project that we have, and their basic reaction to it was that we were just having, we were having a family meeting, but we forgot that it was being recorded possibly. But I just would like to advise us just to remember that we are being recorded and to be sensitive about when we're talking about any related projects, mentioning names, anything of that nature, because it does go out to the public. We know what we're talking about and why we would be having those conversations, but how it plays in Peoria is some other way. So of course, I'm not down for censorship in any way, shape, or form. I just want to be mindful that the public is here, hearing what we say. As your chair, I will rock with us no matter what comes at us. But I did get that piece of feedback, so I just want us to be sensitive about that, okay? It could have been a conversation that you spearheaded, my friend. But I have your back, but I need you to get mine in situations like this, okay? And I just think, it's just easy, it's just easy for us to forget that part. And so, no, but I want us to be able to talk about everything. We do need to just be mindful of that we are conducting business that goes beyond us. So let's just be sensitive to that.
We've also done it in some of our things.
Oh, yes. Like, are we really gonna post that? So yeah, I just wanna make sure that we're compliant, but also being sensitive about what we're talking about. And I wanna let you know that if you ever needed just to run something by, we're having a process, you have a question, please don't ever hesitate to do that. I just think it's really important. And it's like a courtesy and respect thing when things go public. Deal? Can we agree? All right. Go ahead, did you have anything else?
I just wanted to, so I linked this downtown bid newsletter because there's some really great events coming up in relation to Harriet Tubman Day. And like a really good series of just like talks and community events. And I encourage you to take a look at it because there will be people coming into the community for those events. And while I try to curate our list of upcoming events, just know that there are other things happening in the community that we should be paying attention to because it's important for our tourism and for our history and all that stuff. So just take a look at that newsletter and look at what's coming up because I was actually surprised.
That's really great. Is there anything else on your heads or hearts or minds? We good? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So move.
Second,
That's right there.
all those in favor? Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah, I reached out to Grace, so thank you for that, like, I wasn't sure.